Hello, my name's Gary Shotton, and I'm here as a part of Inspiring Better Business. And today we're going to talk about one of the 10 or more miracles that I've experienced in my life. And I want to do this in a way that does not draw attention to me, but draws the attention to God's in the miracle working business. He's in that today. You know, I've observed that many people are involved and want to be involved in a good cause. Maybe it's Save the Whales or an animal shelter or some civic club, and those things are wonderful. Please, I'm not criticizing that. But there's no supernatural events expected in those. It's all natural. And God's in the supernatural business. He wants to be supernatural with you. He wants to prove to you that He's a part of your life in a supernatural way. And we call those miracles. Now, not all of them are spectacular, but many are so unquestionably true that we've got to document them. So I'm just going to share a few in my life. And today I'm going to try to tie this miracle to something that's educational for me. Not for you, but I'm just sharing how each miracle had something that taught me something that I dealt with and was able to use the rest of my life. So today we're going to talk about the miracle of experimenting or experiment. The willingness of us to experiment, and God responds to that. Now, all of us are in the natural world when we start a business are instructed to do the natural research. And yes, that is true. I recommend you do all kinds of research. But in reality, just doing research, if you don't act on it, you've just got all this head knowledge. You've gained all this knowledge. I know people that have so much knowledge, but they've never actually acted on it. And the research is a great thing, but experimenting is the next step. Well, I was about in my second year of my new job. I graduated from college. I lived in the state of Wyoming. I have a good job, a wonderful wife, and we have become Christians after 1 year of our marriage, and things really started moving forward in my personal life in my Christian walk, and not just my Christian walk, but my perspective of life. And we bought a home. It was an older home. It had been there maybe 50 years old or older, and it had 14 acres with it. And that gave me room, kind of like this back behind me is a pasture for a golf course. But in my backyard, or in my part of this ranch setting, was 14 acres. And I divided those 14 acres. It was already divided mostly into a 5-acre plot of grass and another 5 acres and then another 4 acres. And it allowed me to graze this into a good way of grazing for cattle. Now, I'm from a cattle background, and so, but I wasn't from a bull and mama cow kind of operation. We never had any bulls. We never had any mama cows. We just raised calves that were purchased at the auction, and we raised them from coming off their mamas to all the way through the feedlot. Well, in this new venture, this new setting, I got to looking around and says, I want to put this land to use. I want to have some income. I want to make something of this. And obviously cattle would be the thing to do. And I analyzed the situation from a natural sense, that if I just had beef cattle, I could butcher them and sell them for meat. But I said, why don't I try to do something in the new world for me? It was to be dairy. But I didn't want a dairy. I was just going to raise the calves. I knew that if I could come up with a heifer, a calf that becomes impregnated and ready to give birth and ready to go to be milked, man, that's the highest return on the same amount of time as I could have. So I started experimenting. I started looking around, and I discovered that the dairies wanted to get rid of their bull calves because they were considered an extra. They just didn't want to have them around, and I could buy those real cheap, but I wanted to buy some heifers, some females, because when they grow up 2 years later, they're going to be worth at least $1,000 each. And so, sure enough, I was able to nose around and found some dairies that finally they said they would sell me a baby calf for $75. I had to go get them, and I had to drive a little ways to get them. And then I started feeding them. How can I feed them? Not just with a bottle. I figured out a way to feed 10 at a time with a milking machine, a homemade milking machine. But then I got to analyzing the mama cows, and I said, wow, their mama cow, if they must be able to produce at least 6 gallons of milk a day, or they're going to be hamburger. In other words, the dairies won't keep them unless they produce that much milk. So somewhere around 5 or 6 gallons of milk is a lot of milk. And one baby calf cannot consume 6 gallons of milk. They only need about 1.5 gallons a day. And so I got to thinking, man, if I could train a mama cow to adopt extra baby calves, wouldn't that be neat? And I experimented and I thought about it. And I said, okay, I have a new heifer. Mama never had a baby before because they're easier to train, and sure enough, they're just about ready to give birth, and I found 3 extra baby calves, and when the mama gives birth, I had these lined up, these 3 extra calves, and I put the mama cow into the chute, into a kind of a squeeze pen so I could hold her a little bit tighter, not hurting her or anything, and her bag is full of milk and hurting, and she's ready to be milked, she's wanting to be milked, and the baby's mama, the natural mama calf is the natural calf to the mama is sure hungry, and so I put calf number 1 on tit number 1. And I get 3 other calves, have them already lined out, and I put 1 baby calf on each one of the 4 tits on the mama cow. And I said, man, this is interesting. I must hope this works. I didn't get kicked too bad or anything, and mama's happy because she gets her milk drained, and all the babies are happy, and oh wow, okay, so the next morning I try that again. Mama's full of milk, and baby calves are all hungry, and we put each one on a tit, and away it works. I tried it again that evening. And this is kind of working pretty good. I didn't have to milk, the babies are getting fed, and so now the test, now the real experiment comes. Wow, and so I let mama out. And I let the 4 babies out, and I just watch. I'm thinking, man, I hope this works. Experiment, experiment, experiment. And sure enough, mama cow stopped because she was full of milk, and all those 4 baby cows just like lined up all at once because they knew they better get to the lunch table or there's not going to be anything for them. And so that worked. And I watched them again that next day and the next day, and I kept an eye on them. I kept lots of corn, extra food for mama because she's giving out a lot of milk. She needs to be fed real good. This worked. Well, I got another mama, and I got another mama. I had 3 mamas that I had baby calves on, and I had a little deal going because once they got to about 150 days, that's big enough for these babies to be on milk. They can be taken off of milk, and we had good feed for them, good hay and all that, and good water, and I got 3 more babies for each one of those cows. Wow, this is actually working pretty good. All because I was willing to experiment. God wants us not only to do research, but to do some experimenting. Take a risk. Do it. You can do it privately. I didn't tell everybody in town that I was doing this, because what if it didn't work? You don't have to tell everybody. You can make this work in a way that not everybody in town knows that you're doing it. And sure enough, God performed a miracle. He gave me wisdom as I was taking steps to go forward in this adventure with these cows. And you know, it had a purpose. I was learning that I could always experiment. I could take a risk, a small step, and you don't even call it starting a business at that point. You just say, hey, in your own mind, and I'm wanting to experiment what's going on here so that I can see whether this might work. So I encourage you to view it this way. I encourage you that don't be afraid to step out. We have so many people that are just like willing to copy someone else, willing to do something that has no chance of being successful because about 20 other people are lined up on the road doing exactly the same thing. You've got to think that God knows your address. He knows where you're at, and He's going to make a difference for you if you can just step out. It's a form of faith. When you start stepping out with even your experimenting, then God sees that. He wants you to step out. He wants you to take that risk and show that there's some action. See, faith without action is dead. Faith without works is dead. Well, faith without corresponding action will not produce life. That's the way I view that. And so you've got to take some steps. And God's not in the business of just dropping favors into your lap because you're a good person. Yeah, that's cool. You've got to be a good person. You've got to trust God. But He's going to only respond to your faith. And your faith is demonstrated by your action. actions. And one of those actions is to take experimenting. And as you're experimenting, you're engaged and you're thinking, you're analyzing. And it seems that when you take that step of work, you take that step of trying something, that gives God the opportunity to now bless you with a miracle. Well, let me finish the rest of the story here, because it really turned out pretty good. Not only did I want the money from those baby calves, but over 2 years later, my wife and I had determined in just thinking, kind of experimenting too, whether we should go to Bible college, Bible school, to learn about faith. I wanted to learn more about faith. And it just happened. Of course, it didn't just happen, because God knew my plan. But 2 years before I'd started these baby calves, a group of them, I had at least 10 or 12 of these baby calves that were now growing up. And they were being big enough to be mamas. And so I had a local veterinarian come and artificially inseminate them, and that way I didn't have to have a bull. And we have them bred, and they're going to have their baby. And the timing was perfect. It wasn't that I planned this and I knew I was going to do this. 2 years earlier, I had started the baby calves, a batch of these. And now the time was, we were determining maybe we should go to Bible school. Well, that means I've got to move 1,000 miles away to this Bible school. I'm going to keep this, my little ranch. I had somebody else move in and take care of it, but I'm moving 1,000 miles away. But the big thing is I'm giving up my paycheck. I'm giving up my insurance, and I'm giving up a vehicle that I had to drive when I was working for this company as an engineer. I'm giving up quite a bit to go do this faith thing. And I said I'd do a leave of absence, and eventually I never came back. But what I needed was some money. And the money was right there, because I sold 10 of these mama cows now. They had been babies 2 years before, and now they're mamas. Now they're ready to be mamas. And I was at one time a little concerned whether I could get them sold, but God intervened and showed me where to sell 10 of them for $1,000 each. I have $10,000 to head to Bible school. Wow, not many people had $10,000 in their bank account when they got started at our Bible school. And God had that plan for me. If it hadn't been for me to experiment and Him to step in and create the opportunity and give me the wisdom, I wouldn't have had the money to go to Bible school. And I showed up at Bible school, and I had a little slack in the rope. I had a reserve. That's what you want to work for. You want to get off of, barely get along street. You want to get off of, I just barely made it street. And I saw those people at Bible school that were in that position. Many of them, boy, they just barely got there, got their tuition. That puts a lot of pressure on. And I don't know that God is any more impressed with that He is a merciful God. He will bail you out. But, does He have to bail you out every time, every day? I think God would want us to learn faith, learn how to get ahead, get some extra gas in the tank, not always be on the bottom 1/8 of the gallon of tank of gas. Get ahead, get in a position to be givers, get in a position to be valuable to somebody else. God wants that. I really believe that. He wants that in you. So maybe you're interested in starting something, and you're thinking about maybe baking some cakes. Well, experiment. Bake some cakes with the ingredients you have. And maybe you're thinking about starting a hair salon. Do something that's unique for you, something you want to do. Agriculture was natural for me. That's probably not natural for everybody. Somebody else wants to maybe start a garden or start some farming. Well, find a little plot of ground and start experimenting. It's best if you have a little reserve so you can do this without a lot of pressure. It's not fair to have a new business start up and in 1 week you need $100, $200, $500. It's seed time and a harvest. You've got to plant sometime, and then there's a time period between planting these ideas and actually getting the money. So work it out, and God will help you. Well, I hope this is helpful. I want you to be excited about God, and I want you to know that God's in the miracle business. God will do it for me. He'll do it for you. Thanks for being a part of Inspiring Better Business and this series on miracles.